ask a question? Yeah, I'm going to move this back a little bit. I don't think we have the kind of audience that we need for this. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. We're reciting Dua Nudba on our behalf of our family members, our community, all the mu'mineen, all those in need of dua. Qurbatan ilallah. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammadin Nabiyyihi wa alihi wa sallama taslima. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Allahumma lakal hamdu ala ma jara bihi qada'uka fi awliyaik alladhina istakhlastahum li nafsika wa dinik إذ اخترت لهم جزيل ما عندك من النعيم المقيم الذي لا زوال له ولا إضمحلال بعد أن شرطت عليهم الزهد في درجات هذه الدنيا الدنية وزخرفها وزبرجها فشرطوا لك ذلك وعلمت منهم الوفاء به فقبلتهم وقربتهم وقدمت لهم الذكر العلية والثناء الجلية وأهبطت عليهم ملائكتك وكرمتهم بوحيك ورفدتهم بعلمك وجعلتهم الذريئة إليك والوسيلة إلى رضوانك فبعض أسكنته جنتك إلى أن أخرجته منها وبعض حملته في فلكك ونجيته ومن آمن معه من الهلكة برحمتك وبعض اتخذته لنفسك خليلا وسألك لسان صدق في الآخرين فأجبته وجعلت ذلك عليا وبعض كلمته من شجرة تكليما وجعلت له من أخيه ردءا ووزيرا وبعض أولدته من غير أب وآتيته البينات وأيدته بروح القدس وكل شرعت له شريعة ونهجت له منهاجه وتخيرت له أوصياءه مستحفظا بعد مستحفظ من مدة إلى مدة إقامة لدينك وحجة على عبادك ولئلا يزول الحق عن مقره ويغلب الباطل على أهله ولا يقول أحد لولا أرسلت إلينا رسولا منذرا وأقمت لنا علما هاديا فنتبع آيتك من قبل أن نضل ونخزى إلى أن انتهيت بالأمر إلى حبيبك ونجيبك محمد صلى الله عليه وآله فكان كما انتجبته سيد من خلقته وصفوة من استفيته وأفضل من اجتبيته وأكرم من اعتمدته قدمته على أنبيائك وبعثته إلى الثقلين من عبادك وأوتعته مشارقك ومغاربك وسخرت له البراق وعرجت بروحه إلى السماء وأودعته علم ما كان وما يكون إلى انقضاء خلقك ثم نصرته بالرعب وحففته بجبرائيل وميكائيل والمسومين من ملائكتك، ووعدته أن تظهر دينه على الدين كله ولو كره المشركون، وذلك بعد أن بوأته مبوأ صدق من أهله، وجعلت له ولهم أول بيت وضع للناس للذي ببكة مباركة وهدى للعالمين فيه آيات بينات مقام إبراهيم ومن دخله كان آمنا. وقلت إنما يريد الله ليذهب عنكم الرجس أهل البيت ويطهركم تطهيرا. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. ثم جعلت أجر محمد صلواتك عليه وآله مودتهم في كتابك، فقلت قل لا أسألكم عليه أجرا إلا المودة في القربى، وقلت ما سألتكم من أجر فهو لكم، وقلت ما أسألكم عليه من أجر إلا من شاء أن يتخذ إلى ربه سبيلا، فكانوا هم السبيل إليك والمسلك إلى رضوانك. فلما أنقضت أيامه أقام وليه علي بن أبي طالب صلواتك عليهما وآلهما هاديا، إذ كان هو المنذر ولكل قوم هاد. فقال والملأ أمامه من كنت مولاه فعلي مولاه، اللهم وال من والاه وعاد من عاداه وانصر من نصره واخذل من خذله. وقال من كنت أنا نبيه فعلي أميره، وقال أنا وعلي من شجرة واحدة وسائر الناس من شجر شتى، وأحله محل هارون من موسى، فقال له أنت مني بمنزلة هارون من موسى إلا أنه لا نبي بعدي. وزوجه ابنته سيدة النساء العالمين، وأحل له من مسجده ما حل له، وسد الأبواب إلا بابه، ثم أودعه علمه وحكمته، فقال أنا مدينة العلم وعلي بابها، فمن أراد المدينة والحكمة فليأتها من بابها. ثم قال أنت أخي ووسيهي ووارثي، لحمك من لحمي ودمك من دمي، وسلمك سلمي وحربك حربي، والإيمان مخالة لحمك ودمك كما خالة لحمي ودمي، وأنت غدا على الحوض خليفتي، وأنت تقضي ديني وتنجز عداتي، وشيعتك على منابر من نور مبيضة وجوههم حولي في الجنة وهم جيراني. ولولا أنت يا علي لم يعرف المؤمنون بعدي، وكان بعده هدى من الضلال ونورا من العمى وحبل الله المتين وصراطه المستقيم، لا يسبق بقرابة في رحم ولا بسابقة في الدين، ولا يلحق في منقبة من مناقبه يحذو حذو الرسول صلى الله عليهما وآلهما، ويقاتل ولا التأويل، ولا تأخذه في الله لومة لائم، قد وتر فيه سناديد العرب، وقتل أبطالهم وناوش ضعبانهم، فأودع قلوبهم أحقادا بدرية وخيبرية وهنينية وغيرهن، فعذبت على دعوته وأكبت على منابذته، حتى قتل الناكثين والقاستين والمارقين. ولما قضى نحبه وقتله أشكى الآخرين يتمع أشكى الأولين. لم يمتثل أمر رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله في الهادين بعد الهادين، والأمة مسرة على مقته مجتمعة على قطيعة الرحم وإقصاء ولده إلا القليل ممن وفى رعاية الحق فيهم، فقتل من قتل وسبي من سبي وأقصي من أقصي، وجرى القضاء لهم بما يرجى له الحسن المثوبة، إذ كانت الأرض لله يورثها من يشاء من عباده، والعاقبة للمتقين. وسبحان ربنا إن كان وعد ربنا لمفعولا ولن يخلف الله وعده وهو العزيز الحكيم. فعلى الأطايب من أهل محمد وعلي صلى الله عليهما وآلهما فليبكي الباكون وإياهم فليندب النادبون، ولمثلهم فلتذرف الدموع وليصرخ الصارخون ويضج الضاجون ويعج العاجون. أين الحسن أين الحسين أين أبناء الحسين؟ صالح بعد الصالح وصادق بعد الصادق. أين السبيل بعد السبيل؟ أين الخيرة بعد الخيرة؟ أين الشموس طالعة؟ أين الأقمار المنيرة؟ أين أنجم الزاهرة؟ أين أعلام الدين وقواعد العلم؟ أين بقية الله التي لا تخلو من العترة الهادية؟ أين المعد لقطع دابر الظلمة؟ أين المنتظر لإقامة العمت والعوج؟ أين المرتجى لإزالة الجور والعدوان؟ أين المدخر لتجديد الفرائض والسنن؟ أين المتخير لإعادة الملة والشريعة؟ أين مؤمل لإحياء الكتاب وحدوده؟ أين محيي معالم الدين وأهله؟ أين قاسم شوقة المعتدين؟ أين هادم أبنية الشرك والنفاق؟ أين مبيد أهل الفسوق والإسيان والطغيان؟ أين حاسد فروع الغي والشقاق؟ أين طامس آثار الزيغ والأهواء؟ أين قاطئ حبائل الكذب والافتراء؟ أين مبيد الأتاة والمرضى؟ أين المستأصل أهل العناد والتضليل والإلحاد؟ أين معز الأولياء ومذل الأعداء؟ أين جامع الكلمة على التقوى؟ أين باب الله الذي منه يؤتى؟ أين وجه الله الذي إليه يتوجه الأولياء؟ أين سبب المتصل بين الأرض والسماء؟ أين صاحب يوم الفتح وناشر الراية الهدى؟ أين مؤلف شمل الصلاح والرضا؟ أين طالب بذهول الأنبياء وأبناء الأنبياء؟ أين طالب بدم المقتول بكربلاء؟ أين المنصور على من اعتدى عليه وافترى؟ أين المضطر الذي يجاب إذا دعا؟ أين صدر الخلائق ذو البر والتقوى؟ أين ابن النبي المصطفى وابن علي المرتضى وابن خديجة الغراء وابن فاطمة الكبرى؟ بأبي أنت وأمي ونفسي لك الوقاء والحماء يا ابن السادة المقربين، يا ابن النجباء الأكرمين، يا ابن الهداة المهديين، يا ابن الخيرة المحذبين، يا ابن الغطارفة الأنجبين، يا ابن الأطايب المطهرين، يا ابن الغضارمة المنتجبين، يا ابن القماقمة الأكرمين، يا ابن البدور المنيرة، يا ابن السرج المضيئة، يا ابن الشهب الثاقبة، يا ابن الأنجم الزاهرة، يا ابن السبل الواضحة، يا ابن الأعلام اللائحة، يا ابن العلوم الكاملة، يا ابن السنن المشهورة، يا ابن المعالم المأثورة، يا ابن المعجزات الموجودة، يا ابن الدلائل المشهودة، يا ابن الصراط المستقيم، يا ابن النبأ العظيم، يا ابن من هو في أم الكتاب لدى الله علي حكيم، يا ابن الآيات والبينات، يا ابن الدلائل الظاهرات، يا ابن البراهين الواضحات الباهرات، يا ابن الحجج البالغات، يا ابن النعم السابغات، يا ابن طه والمحكمات، يا ابن ياسين والضاريات، يا ابن تور والعاديات، يا ابن من دنا فتدلى فكان قاب قوسين أو أدنى دنوا واقترابا من العلي الأعلى. ليت شعري أين استقرت بك النوى، بل أي أرض تقلك الثرى. أبي رضوى أو غيرها أمضي توى. عزيز علي أن أرى الخلق ولا ترى، ولا أسمع لك حسيسا ولا نجوى. عزيز علي أن تحيط بك دوني البلوى، ولا ينالك مني ضجيجا ولا شكوى. بنفسي أنت من مغيب لم يخلو منا، بنفسي أنت من نازه ما نزع عنا. بنفسي أنت أمنية الشائق يتمنى، من مؤمن ومؤمنة ذكر فحنا. بنفسي أنت من عقيد عز لا يسامى، بنفسي أنت من أثيل مجد لا يجاره. بنفسي أنت من تلاد نعم لا تضاح، بنفسي أنت من نسيف شرف لا يساوى. إلى متى أحار فيك يا مولاي، وإلى متى وأي خطاب أسف فيك وأي نجوى. عزيز علي أن أجاب دونك وأناغى، عزيز علي أن أبكيك ويخذلك الورى. عزيز علي أن يجري عليك دونهم ما جرى. هل من معين فأطيل معه العويل والبقى، هل من جزوع فأساعد جزعه إذا خلا. هل قضيت عين فساعدتها عيني على القضاء. هل إليك يا ابن أحمد سبيل فتلقى، هل يتصل يومنا منك بعدة فنحظى. متى نرد مناهلك الروية فنروى، متى ننتقئ من عذب مائك فقد طال الصدى. متى نغاديك ونراوحك فنقر عينا، متى ترانا ونراك وقد نشرت اللواء النصر. ترانا نحف بك وأنت تؤم الملأ، وقد ملأت الأرض عدلا وأذقت أعداءك هوانا وعقابا. وأبرت العتاة وجحدت الحق وقطعت دابر المتكبرين، واجتثثت أصول الظالمين. ونحن نقول الحمد لله رب العالمين. صلى الله على محمد وعلى محمد. اللهم أنت كشاف الكرب والبلوى، وإليك أستعدي فعندك العدوى. وأنت رب الآخرة والدنيا، فأغث يا غياث المستغيثين عبيدك المبتلى. وأره سيده يا شديد القوى، وأزل عنه به العسى والجوى. وبرد غليله يا من على العرش استوى، ومن إليه رجع والمنتهى. اللهم ونحن عبيدك التائقون إلى وليك المذكر بك وبنبيك، خلقته لنا عصمة وملاذا، وأقمته لنا قواما ومعاذا، وجعلته للمؤمنين منا إماما، فبلغه منا تحية والسلاما. وزدنا بذلك يا رب إكراما، واجعل مستقره لنا مستقرا ومقاما. وأتمم نعمتك بتقديمك إياه أمامنا، حتى توردنا جنانك ومرافقة الشهداء من خلصائك. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد، وصل على محمد جده ورسولك سيد الأكبر، وعلى أبيه سيد الأصغر، وجدته صديقة الكبرى فاطمة بنت محمد صلى الله عليه وآله، وعلى من استفيت من آبائه البررة، وعليه أفضل وأكمل وأتم وأدوم وأكثر وأوفر ما صليت على أحد من أسفيائك وخيرتك من خلقك، وصل عليه صلاة لا غاية لعددها ولا نهاية لمددها ولا نفاد لأمدها. اللهم وأقم به الحق وأدحض به الباطل وأدل به أولياءك واذلل به أعداءك، وصل اللهم بيننا وبينه وصلة تعدي إلى مرافقة السلف، واجعلنا ممن يأخذون في حجزتهم ويمكثون في ذلهم، وأعنا على تعدية حقوقه إليه والاجتهاد في طاعته واجتناب معصيته، وامن علينا برضاه، وهب لنا رأفته ورحمته ودعاءه وخيره ما ننال به سعة من رحمتك وفوزا عندك، واجعل صلاتنا به مقبولة وذنوبنا به مغفورة ودعاءنا به مستجابة، واجعل أرزاقنا به مبسوطة وهمومنا به مكفية وحوائجنا به مقضية، وأقبل إلينا بوجهك الكريم واقبل تقربنا إليك، وانظر إلينا نظرة رحيمة نستكمل بها الكرامة عندك، ثم لا تسرفها عنا بجودك، واسقنا من حوض جده صلى الله عليه وآله بكأسه وبيده ريان رويا هنيئا سائغا لا ظمأ بعده يا أرحم الراحمين. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد. From the mustahabbat is to recite 2 rakat salat, dua nudba, qurbatan ilallah.
إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما. الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن محمد رسول الله. أشهد أن محمد رسول الله. أشهد أن عليا ولي الله. أشهد أن عليا حجة الله. حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة. حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح. حي على خير العمل حي على خير العمل الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله لا إله إلا الله وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وآله وسلم.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين ثم الصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا وحبيب إله العالمين أبي القاسم محمد صلى على محمد وعلى آله الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين واللعنة على أعدائهم أجمعين من الآن إلى قيام يوم الدين. أما بعد, respected elders, brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Alhamdulillah, by the blessing of the day of Friday, we have the opportunity to continue our discussion around the Holy Quran, where we are beginning our discussion of the tafsir of the 70th chapter of the Holy Quran. In understanding some of this tafsir that we discuss are those affairs that are associated with asbab al-nuzul, the causes of the revelation, the interpretation of the terminology of the words in the discussion. One of the important points to understand about the concept of tafsir is that not every person possesses the right to do it, because it is impermissible for one to interject their opinion about the words of Allah's commands into the command of Allah. When tafsir is done, it is done on the basis of the ahadith, the language and the tariq that is provided to us by our Holy Prophet, the Ahlul Bayt alayhim as-salatu was-salam. In this chapter, the 70th chapter, which is known as Surah Al-Ma'arij, the title Ma'arij is a name that is actually appointed to the surah by us, not by Allah. As we've mentioned before, the names of surahs are given by us. The surah, its structure, its verses are given by Allah. Another name for this surah, which is less commonly referred to, is Surah Sa'ala Sa'il, which refers to the first verse within the Quran. Ma'arij is a term that's used twice in this surah, and its definition is, translation is sometimes called ascending stairways or the lofty stations, because of the interpretation of how Ma'arij has been used in this surah. This surah is known as a surah revealed in Makkah. One of the specialities and differences between the surahs of Makkah and Medina is that surahs that are revealed in Makkah typically spend more of their time talking about aqeedah or aqaid, points pertaining to either tawheed, adalat, nabuwat, imamat and ma'ad. Significantly, this surah spends a significant amount of time talking about the day of judgment and the people of hell and heaven, similar to the surah prior to the surah Haqqah that we completed last week. These two surahs, the 69th chapter and the 70th chapter, Surah Al-Haqqah and Surah Al-Ma'arij, are considered almost sisters in their meaning by many mufassirin because of the similitude of conversations between the two surahs. However, this chapter, the 70th chapter, Surah Al-Ma'arij, while majority of it was revealed in the city of Mecca, there are some verses of this surah that are revealed in the city of Medina. One of these explanations, that when we see that a surah can be collectively referred to as a Makki or Madani surah, but it has some references to revelation that came either in the city of Mecca and Medina, alternating from what it's popularly known as, is one of the proofs and explanations that says
that the Quran in its structure is something that was given to us by Allah specifically. That when the verse was revealed, even though majority of the chapter may have been revealed in a different city, Allah indicated to our Prophet where these verses belong, and our Prophet then interspersed those verses within the various chapters. So to say that, for example, we can have a Makki surah, a surah revealed in Makkah, but some of the verses within that surah were revealed in Medina, is a proof and authority that it wasn't us who selected this or the Prophet who selected this, but Allah who indicated where each of these verses belongs. And it's one of the proofs that we talk about when we discuss ulum al-Quran, or the sciences of the Quran, that tell us that the structure of the Quran is divinely revealed and not the discretion of man in how it is structured. Which is why, actually, as a matter of fact, the first discussion of this surah begins with verses revealed in Medina, not revealed in Mecca. There are some specific benefits to reciting this surah, the first of which is narrated by our Holy Prophet Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. When he describes the surah, he says, whoever recites the surah, man sa'ala sa'ilun. The surah that begins with this verse, sa'ala sa'ilun, because the name Ma'arij was appointed to it afterwards. Allah will, one who recites the surah, Allah will grant him rewards of those who keep their covenants, as well as those who are attentive toward the establishment of their wajib salat that they are mandated to perform. Meaning the regular recitation of this surah, according to our Prophet, raise the status of a person on the Day of Judgment to be those who was consistent in his prayer and one who fulfilled his covenants and responsibilities. Similarly, in this subject and note, we have a narration from Imam Muhammad al-Baqir alayhi salam, that one who regularly recites this surah, Surah al-Ma'arij, will not be subject to extreme scrutiny on the Day of Judgment regarding his sins, but he shall abide in paradise in the company of the Holy Prophet. And the bestowal of such rewards is dependent on fulfilling one's religious obligations. Meaning, what the Imam is explaining is he says that this surah can raise you to the status of being a companion of our Prophet in heaven, but not without fulfilling the obligations that accompany the necessity of reciting the surah. These instructions and these ahadith are there and designed for us to promote and have a desire to build a connection with the Quran and the various chapters of the Quran. Now, as I mentioned, the first 3 verses in this surah, and that's what I hope to accomplish the end of today's discussion, is to explain the beginning of this chapter by mentioning the first 3 verses of this surah, in which Allah begins, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, Sa'ala sa'ilun bi'adhabin waqi'. This discussion is referred to as a discussion that takes place in the city of Medina and refers to a conversation with a person and our Holy Prophet after the event of Ghadir Qum. Now, there are 2 sets of narrations about this discussion. One refers to the person who comes to speak to the Prophet as being a person by the name of Nu'man ibn Harith al-Fahri, and the other person is known as Nadhr ibn Harith. These 2 people in history are different people, actually. Nadhr ibn Harith was a polytheist who never accepted the religion of Islam. And as a matter of fact, very famously, as a businessman, he proceeded into the lands of Persia and brought back the folklore and the tales from Persia back to Arabia and started to announce them and read them. And his enunciation in Arabia of the folklore of the Persians sounded similar to the ears of the Arabs as the Quran of the Prophet. And therefore they said, Prophet Muhammad recites things like this to us, and Nadhr says, then I too am a prophet. And our Prophet said, no, he is not from amongst the Prophet, and what he brings to you is something from himself, and something that is evil within itself, and shara, and has no benefit and goodness for you, though it may sound fun and interesting to listen to. Nadhr, as a consequence of this, said that, oh really, you call yourself a prophet and you call me a liar? Well, if I happen to be a liar, then let the punishment of God rain down on me. And what's said that Nadhr, after this, was one of the participants with the mushrikeen in the Battle of Badr. And he was captured in the Battle of Badr and given capital punishment, beheaded after the Battle of Badr for being a combatant against our Holy Prophet and being one who refused any source of guidance, and as someone who brought people to misguidance. And they say that the example of this surah begins with the conversation of Nadhr ibn Harith and says that Nadhr ibn Haris was the one who asked for, and the asker who asked for the punishment of Allah to befall him. And that verse number 2, لِلْكَافِرِينَ لَيْسَ لَهُ الدَّافِعُ, and for the disbelievers there is no one who can protect them from the punishment of Allah. Now, the reason, many Ahl Sunnah refer to this as being Nadhr ibn Harith, but the argument comes and says, if this is Nadhr ibn Harith, then the punishment that Allah is promising in the second verse was not the punishment of Allah, because he received capital punishment, not divine punishment. But it's a point of debate, and there are many mufassirin of the Ahl Sunnah school of thought, and even some of our own Shia books, for example in Majma' al-Bayan, reference and say that many mufassirin have referred to this verse in Revelation according to Nadhr ibn Harith. However, it's more likely that this discussion is about Nu'man ibn Harith. And the proof that it is about Nu'man ibn Harith is one of the authentic narrations with its entirety and chain of narration that we possess, goes back to our sixth Imam Ja'far ibn Muhammad as-Sadiq alayhi salam. And Imam Sadiq specifies that this is about Nu'man ibn Harith. As well as Al-Amini in his Kitab al-Ghadir outlines and highlights over 30 different mufassirin from the 3rd and 4th century after Islam, who also narrate specifically that this is talking about Nu'man ibn Harith, not Nadhr ibn Harith. The discrepancy between these two is significant. Let me explain why. Nu'man ibn Harith was someone who did accept the religion of Islam. And after the event of Ghadir, in which our Prophet went to the people and announced to them, Man kuntu mawla fahada aliyun mawla, that after this became popular and well known, the word from Ghadir Khum spread out amongst Arabia that our Prophet has appointed a successor and has appointed Ali ibn Abi Talib to be the continuity of this message after the Prophet. Nu'man became frustrated by this entire situation and proceeded to the city of Medina to question our Prophet about this event. Nu'man, in the narration from our sixth Imam, says, طار ذلك في البلاد فقدم على النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم النعمان ibn Harith. That when this news became popular in Arabia, Nu'man ibn Harith approached our Holy Prophet. فقال أمرتنا أن الله أمرتنا عن الله أن نشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وأنك رسول الله وأمرتنا بالجهاد والحج والصوم والصلاة والزكاة فقبلناها ثم لم ترضى حتى نصبت هذا الغلام فقال من كنت مولاه فعلي مولاه فهذا الشيء منك أو أمر من عند الله. Here Nu'man brings his complaint, which is narrated in history. He says, O Prophet, you came to us and said that Allah told you to believe there is no God but Allah and that you are His Prophet. We accepted. Then you told us to perform jihad. And you told us to go to Hajj. You told us to fast. You told us to pray. You told us to give zakat. And we accepted all of these things. Now, you're not happy with this, all of this that we've accepted that you commanded us to, until you take this young man. Ghulam in this sense doesn't mean servant, it means this young man. Because remember, Imam Ali was not 30 years of age at this point in time when this happened. He says, and yet now you won't be satisfied until you take this young man and you place him over us? Now tell me, is it you who are saying this, or is it Allah who has said this? In reply to this, our Prophet replied, Wallahi alladhi la ilaha illahu, inna hadha min Allah. I swear to God besides whom there is no God, that this command that Ali is your commander has come directly from Allah Himself. Upon hearing this, Nu'man ibn Harith becomes very upset, leaves the company of the Prophet, and as he heads back to his camel to walk away from the city of Medina and this religion, he says, I swear to God, if this is a command from Allah, let the punishment of Allah fall on me now. And in response to this, it said that before Nu'man reached his camel, a stone fell from the sky and split Nu'man from his head to his feet in one instance, and he received the punishment of Allah. In reply to this action of Nu'man and his divine punishment that he receives, came the first verse of Surah Al-Ma'arij, سَأَلَ سَائِلٌ بِعَذَابٍ وَاقِعٍ. That the questioner and the asker who asks for the punishment surely is befallen by the punishment. لِلْكَافِرِينَ لَيْسَ لَهُ الدَّافِعُ. And that for those who are faithless, there is none who can avert the punishment from them. That in reaction to this Nu'man, and which is why the description and discrepancy between Nu'man ibn Harith and the other one whom we talked about, Nadhr ibn Harith, is significant enough that saying it's Nadhr ibn Harith hides a particular story behind what actually happened to the one who asked for the punishment of Allah. So when we see that there's a discrepancy between who is this verse talking about, we're more likely to believe that it's Nu'man, because Nu'man actually suffers divine punishment, calls for divine punishment, and calls for this divine punishment because of the appointment and the enunciation of the Khilafat of Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam. Which opens an interesting discussion. Many times there's a criticism that says that, oh, the name of Ali ibn Abi Talib is not mentioned in the Quran. But you cannot read the Quran and understand its tafsir and its interpretation without realizing the significance and the continuity of the mention of Ali and events pertaining to Ali ibn Abi Talib in the Quran. So this is another one of those verses that gives us an explanation and a relationship to our master, our Imam. The third verse is where there's an interesting discussion that talks about where the name of this surah has been taken from and the difference in the meaning of this surah and its name. Min Allahi dhil ma'arij. This verse, when we take a look at these three verses, one narration says that these three verses are one conversation, which essentially says, سَأَلَ سَائِلٌ بِعَذَابِ الْوَاقِعِ لِلْكَافِرِينَ لَيْسَ لَهُ الدَّافِعِ مِنَ اللَّهِ ذِي الْمَعَارِجِ. That this is all one conversation, that the questioner asks for the punishment of God, and there is nothing that will protect the disbelievers from Allah's punishment that comes from Allah, dhil ma'arij, the possessor of ma'arij. The term ma'arij can have a variety of different meanings, and this is where, for example, when we look at an English translation, we're seeing the interpretation and the opinion of the translator, not the reality of the meaning. Let me explain what that means. Ma'arij can refer to at least three different things, as the various mufassirin have explained. For one, this ma'arij refers to ascension is an attribute of Allah, that it has several aspects to it. One of them is that the meaning is the one who has high virtues and ranks, and this is a status given to the prophets. That the prophets are those who are referred to as dhil ma'arij, the possessors of loftiness, that Allah has lifted them to uruj, to lofty positions. The second interpretation of this points to the idea that ma'arij, love, refers to the physical aspect of ascending to Allah through the heavens, and it refers to the malaika, who are those who perform ma'arij and who ascend through the heavens to Allah to reach and receive His commands and return them to His creation. These are two interpretations. One, ma'arij refers to a location in the heavens that are given to the anbiya and the pious people and the awsiya and the representatives of Allah, that is above the rest of the people who shall receive reward. The second interpretation is it refers to those malaika, dhil ma'arij, specifically for angels who perform this process of ascending and returning from the heights of the heavens back to present Allah's command. The third meaning is dhil ma'arij. Ma'arij, the lofty stations, refers to the heavens and Jannah within itself. That Allah is the possessor of the heavens, and which is why He is known as dhil ma'arij, the possessor of the lofty stations. When looking at these three interpretations, we can see that someone who takes Surah Al-Ma'arij and interprets it in their own way, and you'll see in English translations, if you pick up different translations, you'll find different interpretations. Some English translations will refer to it very clearly and say that this is the ascending stairways, in reference to the angels who climb up and down through the heavens. That ma'arij refers to the pathways that they follow. One of the reasons why this is justified or explained is to say that, for example, we know that Mi'raj, the event of the Prophet, was the ascension through the heavens. So therefore those who regularly ascend to and from the heavens, this is referring to them and how they perform this path. Another interpretation is the lofty stations, that it talks about that Allah is the one who can reward greatly. And the third is that all of the heavens are the ma'arij and the raised platforms and the stations of Allah. Now, most commonly, you'll see this in its first interpretation that we presented, saying that this is a discussion talking about the angels who climb up and down through the heavens. And the explanation for that we can see in the fourth verse, which opens up a much longer and very interesting conversation. The fourth verse, which gives us some context, is where Allah makes the statement, تَعْرَجُ الْمَلَائِكَةُ وَالرُّوحِ إِلَيْهِ, that they are those that the angels and the spirits ascend to him. So the idea that Allah in the 4th verse is giving context, that it's the angels and the spirits who climb up to Allah and to visit him or to go to his edge of his creation, this idea is referring to the process of going through the heavens, and which is why Ma'arij, one interpretation is that this is pertaining to the path that the angels take and the angels themselves who go up and come down from that location. Does it have to be this one meaning? Can we be so confident to say that this is the exact meaning because of the context that we're seeing in the 4th verse? Not necessarily. Because many times Allah can use one term in two separate connotations, one verse apart. It doesn't mandate that the two have to be affiliated. Which is why the 4th interpretation of this is when Allah says Dhil Ma'arij, Allah is describing his attribute, the possessor of the heavens, that Allah is referring to himself in the 3rd verse. And then he's describing that since he's the possessor of the heavens, the angels are the ones who climb through his heavens to go and to receive messages and direction from him specifically. The 4th verse actually continues, فِي يَوْمٍ كَانَ مِقْدَارُهُ خَمْسِينَ أَلْفَ سَنَةٍ. This end of the 4th verse starts a very interesting conversation, which talks about that Allah is saying that they climb through the heavens to Allah فِي يَوْمٍ, in a day whose length or whose span is 50,000 years. There's an entire discussion of what Allah means when he describes and he says a day whose length is 50,000 years. And the description of whether that means by time, whether that means by distance, or whether it's a combination of the context, and inshallah we'll go into the analysis of this in our next discussion. We ask Allah by the right of this day, by the right of the Hadireen, that, oh Allah, increase our tawfiq to keep attached to the Holy Quran. Oh Allah, by the sadaqah of the Quran, attach us to your Ahlul Bayt and your upright religion. Oh Allah, forgive our sins and cover our flaws. Ya Allah, keep our children on the upright path of Islam and hasten the appearance of Sahibul Zaman. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. وَالْعَصْرِ إِنَّ الْإِنسَانَ لَفِي خُسْرٍ إِلَّا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالْحَقِّ وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالصَّبْرِ. صدق الله العلي العظيم. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، ثم الصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا وحبيب إله العالمين أبي القاسم محمد. اللهم صل وسلم على أمير المؤمنين علي بن أبي طالب وفاطمة الزهراء سيدة النساء العالمين، والحسن والحسين سيد شباب أهل الجنة، وعلي بن الحسين زين العابدين، ومحمد بن علي باقر علم النبيين، وجعفر بن محمد الصادق، وموسى بن جعفر الكاظم، وعلي بن موسى الرضا، ومحمد بن علي الجواد، وعلي بن محمد الهادي، والحسن بن علي الأسكري، وحجة الله يا ابن الحسن يا صاحب العصر والزمان. عجل الله تعالى فرجه وسهل الله تعالى مخرجه وظهوره وجعلنا من أعوانه والأنصاره والمستشهدين بين يديه. اللهم اغفر للمؤمنين والمؤمنات والمسلمين والمسلمات الأحياء منهم والأموات، تابع بيننا وبينهم بالخيرات، إنك مجيب الدعوات، إنك على كل شيء قدير. أوصيكم ونفسي بتقوى الله. I enjoin upon you and myself to have fear and piety of Allah. The 22nd of December in most of the world this year is the shortest day of the year. As it happens that for North America, the shortest day of the year was actually yesterday. So all of this is associated with the tilt of the earth farthest away from the sun. And at the time that it tilts farthest away from the sun, it began for us yesterday, and for the rest of the world it begins today. So shortest day, longest night, shortest day. For those of us who have qadha fasts, it's time. It's time to take advantage of this. This is the time to get some work done. And it's not just me saying that, but rather, as a matter of fact, we have a hadith from the Ahlul Bayt that tell us that winter is the springtime of the believer. That its nights are long to make ibadat easy in the night, and its days are short to make fasting easy in the day. So for the believer, this is considered springtime. This is the time to rush towards these activities and take advantage of this time to catch up on affairs. That if we had some qada, whether from last year, years past, this is the time to make it up. The nights are very long. If you really want to think about it, you can go over 12 hours without praying only in the winter, where if you prayed exactly at 5 something at night when Maghrib became Ada, or 4 something now as a matter of fact, your next salat wouldn't be until 6 o'clock the next morning, which is almost 14 hours. And sometimes what happens is that 14-hour break, you feel kind of odd that you haven't prayed in 14 hours. So it's a good opportunity to take advantage of Salat al-Layl, night prayers, and to take this opportunity, and which is why it's referred to the springtime of the believer, that we take advantage of this time. But along with it being the springtime of the believer, it's a period that's associated with a great deal of anxiety and depression. As a matter of fact, there's even a condition called SAD, seasonal affective disorder, which essentially says that us as people, when the winter months come, we have a tendency to go through sadness and depression because it's too cold that we don't spend as much time outdoors. The nights are very long, so it's very hard to go outside and do other activities. The dangers of driving and being active outside and the severity of the cold make it difficult for us, and as a consequence, our personalities and our behaviors change in this season. And one of the things that they found a significant correlation is that the seasonal affective disorder has, while individually it may cause depression or anxiety, collectively it has a tendency to create anger and animosity in communities. I'm not saying that about you guys, I'm saying in general. And what it essentially says is that a reflection of the fact that you're dealing with the difference of your ability to go out and enjoy the weather or to be able to accomplish tasks is you become more aggressive towards people that you're in contact with. And this condition that happens in this time period has been described through many different things. For example, holiday rage is something that recently was brought to my attention, that there's such a thing as holiday rage, that says around Christmas time there's an increase of aggression between people and fights and issues that come up, and they blamed it on the holidays and all the anxiety of having your relatives and family together, and others who have said, no, it's just the nature of how weather plays out in our lives. But one of the consequences that has been collectively agreed upon is the idea that this, whether you believe it to be a real condition or not, is that in this time frame it's very common for more aggressive behavior to be displayed and more anger to be expressed. Anger is something very important to be conscious of. Anger is from one of the tools of shaitan, right? Our sixth Imam Ja'far ibn Muhammad as-Sadiq alayhi salam explains, and he says, Al-ghadabu miftahu kulli shar, that anger is the key to all of the evil that you can perform. The Imam's statement here, and the consciousness of us, for us here, is that if the weather, the environment play upon us, change our behavior, you can't go out for walks, you don't want to spend much time outside, you feel cooped up indoors, you feel frustrated by the difficulty of driving and going out, your bones hurt from the cold, and kids are all stuck in the house, and let's forget my problems and let's kind of focus here. That the reality is that if we see ourselves subject to our environment becoming angry, be conscious of this anger and be very careful. And the expression of anger is something that's very dangerous and harmful to our iman. It's very hard to be a pious, religious person who believes in Allah and be someone who's constantly angry and frustrated and yelling and upset. These two don't go together. And it's something that Islam and the Ahlul Bayt have spent a lot of time explaining to us to be careful about and to invest in time and to know about. Our Holy Prophet Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam talks about this extensively. In one narration he says, Al-ghadabu jamratun min ash-shaytan, that anger is a hot, smoldering ember or coal that is initiated by shaitan in your life to cause your faith to go up in flames. When looking at people who would practice and demonstrate their strength and have strongman competitions, our Prophet says, أَلَا أُخْبِرُكُمْ بِأَشَدِّكُمْ. Shall I tell you who amongst all of you is the strongest amongst you? The one who is of the best amongst you? مَنْ مَلَكَ نَفْسَهُ عِنْدَ الْغَضَبِ. The one who can control himself when he is angry is the best amongst all of you and is the strongest amongst all of the people in my community. This description and the Prophet taking the time to address this explains the severity of the danger that anger poses to us. That if our Prophet takes the time, our Prophet, right, in 23 years, he had to give us divine revelation, and on top of divine revelation, and teach us why this divine revelation was sent, spends a good amount of time, a significant amount of time, warning his community that be careful of anger, it's something dangerous and harmful to you. Which is why, when we see that the Imams after him take the time to explain it as well too. Where, for example, when we see our 6th Imam Ja'far ibn Muhammad as-Sadiq alayhi salam, elaborating on this concept, he says, "Man lam yamlik ghadabahu lam yamlik aqlahu." One who cannot control his anger has no control over his intellect either. He goes further, he says, "Al-ghadabu mamhaqatun liqalbil hakim." That's even for a wise man, that anger is such a thing that it destroys the heart even of a wise man. That it can go and affect and take all of the good that you've built and destroy it. And each of us can think of examples in our life, whether actions that we've done or that have been done to us, of someone whose honor, dignity, status has been destroyed in our eyes or in the eyes of others by a moment of anger and extremity. And this is the time that you're susceptible to, that we're susceptible to it. So it's something to be conscious of and to pay attention to, that just because I possess this anger doesn't mean it deserves to be expressed. Just because it's a natural reaction or the environment isn't acting upon me doesn't mean that I am allowed to be angry and to express this anger or to abuse others that are under my authority, because it's something that happens naturally. We see the statement of Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam, where he goes and he says, rage is a type of madness, because the one who is enraged feels regret later on. Most often he gives the explanation that he says, one who is angered and is enraged and is upset, the consequence of that anger is what? You feel regret afterwards. There are those amongst us who may say, so what? I don't feel regret afterwards. I feel like it's justified. Imam Ali continues, he didn't finish there, let me continue on. He says, and if he does not feel regret, then his madness has become ingrained in his character. Meaning that there's no moment where Imam Ali is saying that your anger is going to be okay for you to express it. Either one, you're going to regret it, or two, if you don't regret it, it means that the madness and the sickness of this anger has become a part of your character, and now you have madness within you. It's a permanent process. Anger is such a thing that even our Ahlul Bayt were not allowed to express it. Where, for example, our Prophet would teach Imam Ali, he says, Ya Ali, la taghdab, فإذا غضبت فاقعد وتفكر في قدرة الرب على العباد وحلمه عنهم. Our Prophet goes so far as to say, oh Ali, never become angry. If you find yourself in a situation where you become angry, sit down. When you sit down, think about the might of Allah over His servant and His right to be angry over His servant, yet the hilm and the leniency that Allah practices over His servant. The indication that Imam is receiving here is that this anger, even if you should feel justified, that I feel justified, my anger is righteous. No one's anger is more righteous than the anger of Allah. Yet Allah, possessing absolute authority, absolute right, look at how He holds off His anger from us. And if Allah can be lenient with us and not express His anger when we commit a sin immediately, then we should be not someone who expresses our anger even when we have the right to express that anger. Finally, we take a look at our Prophet again promoting this aspect of controlling of anger, and one final hadith that we'll mention where he says, Man kaffa ghadabahu kaffa Allahu anhu adhabahu. The most beneficial statement in the consideration of anger and understanding our relationship to it is, what is our expectation? Here, The Prophet says, I'm telling you to control your anger. Let me tell you the benefit of controlling your anger. He says, one who controls his anger and holds it back, even if it's righteous, Allah will hold back His punishment on the day of judgment from him. And there is nothing more righteous than the punishment of Allah. This is the most significant point that we can think of. In that moment of anger and frustration, as much as it may be justified, as much as it may be a consequence of our environment, the days being short, the frustrations we're going through in life, the crazy people that are outside, the people who are expressing anger on us and our desire to reply back to them, hold it. Be patient, even when you feel you're right. Why? Because there is no one who has greater right than Allah over us. And if I want Him to hold His justified anger off of me, I hold my anger off of His creation. And this is how when we do something good, we don't expect a return from people. People can never appreciate the patience that we possess. People never appreciated the patience of Imam Ali or of any of the Ahlul Bayt. But they didn't do it so that people would appreciate this characteristic. They would do it so that Allah would reward and acknowledge them for it. And that's exactly what our Prophet is teaching us. That this anger is dangerous. It's the tool of shaitan, it's your enemy. And you're susceptible to it, now more than ever. But be conscious that you have to control this if you desire the reward of Allah and that Allah holds off His punishment from you. Again, we ask Allah by the rights of this day, by the right of the Hadireen and Ghaibeen, that, oh Allah, first and foremost, forgive our sins and cover our flaws. Ya Allah, we have gathered here with hajat by the right of the day of Friday, by the right of the lessons of your Prophet and the Holy Quran, fulfill our hajat. Ya Allah, there are those amongst our community, our families, the mu'mineen who are suffering through sickness and disease. Ya Allah, give shafa'at to the mu'mineen wherever they are. Oh Allah, there are those amongst the mu'mineen who are suffering through insecurity and strife. Ya Allah, give aman to the mu'mineen wherever they may be in this world. Ya Allah, keep our children on the upright path of Islam. Ya Allah, hasten the reappearance of Sahib al-Zaman. Make us and our families from the upright supporters of Sahib al-Zaman. And entitle us to the ziyarat of Imam Huseein in this world and the shafa of Abu Abdullah in the hereafter. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Inna Allah ya'muru bil-adli wal-ihsani wa ita'i dhil qurba wa yanha 'anil fahsha'i wal-munkar wal-baghi ya'idhukum la'allakum tadhakkarun. Sadaqallahu al-'aliyyul 'azim.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم.